Hello, everyone, and welcome into the sixth episode of Jack's Mailbag, the series where I answer your Gamecock baseball questions. If you have a question you want answered on next week's episode, be sure to drop it in the comments section below on this video, or I'll have a post on the Insiders Forum on GamecockCentral.com at the beginning of every week where you can go ahead and drop all your questions. We got a busy week ahead of baseball. South Carolina is playing Longwood this weekend in a three-game series, and before that, I got a lot of questions in regards to this past weekend series against Clemson. And obviously, it didn't go South Carolina's way, which led way to a lot of in the moment type of questions that I'm now getting to. So I appreciate all the questions that I got, and I'm looking forward to answering them. So without further ado, let's get into our first question this week from Hampton Roads. Is Landon Powell available next season? So I don't know what the details of his contract are. If you don't know, Landon Powell has been coaching at North Greenville for a long time now, and he's won a national championship there at North Greenville. Very nice guy. Got to interview him after he won the national championship, I believe, 2 years ago, and very good guy. Still a Gamecock through and through. But if an opportunity ever came along at South Carolina, whether it's a head coaching role or assistant coach, whatever the case might be, I think he would definitely maybe go to look. Who knows? But I'm not. I don't know what his future plans are or whatever. But I understand why the question's being asked. But the next question comes from Titlecock. Is it pitching or hitting or defense? So this question is in regards to the struggles that South Carolina has been kind of going through lately. Despite being 10-3, they did lose a series against Clemson. So a lot of these questions are going to kind of be surrounded around that series, and we're going to get into all of it. I would say the biggest area of concern right now has to be the offense. I think when you go 4 for 23 with runners in scoring position in 2 games against the Tigers, it's not very pleasing. I mean, you're not going to win a lot of games when you're doing things like that, when you're not able to cash in on golden opportunities to drive runners in. And it's kind of carried into this week, right? With the 2 midweek games against Citadel the other night on Tuesday. I think they had at least 3 or 4 innings where they had the bases loaded and ended up leaving them loaded, which, in those types of situations, you want to get in as many runs as you can. I think at the bare minimum, with the bases loaded, depending on how many outs you have, you need to get at least 2 runs in to make it at least a positive, productive inning. And in some cases, South Carolina was able to do that, but at other times it was just, things just weren't clicking. So right now, the offense is probably my number one concern. However, I know how good this offense can be with all the talent that's in this lineup and off the bench too. So I do believe they're going to be able to turn around. And then the pitching and stuff, I think the pitching's been very solid as well as the defense, in my opinion. Next question comes from Hampton Roads again. And they ask, in all seriousness, I've contended that Mark Kingston is so tied to statistics and metrics that he has no feel for the game. What say you? I have to disagree. I think in today's age of baseball, not just college, but this also is more so at the professional level too, analytics specifically are becoming such a big part of the way the game is, right? A lot of teams use analytics to get more in-depth scouting and advantages in the game. And whether you like it or not, that's kind of how the game works now. Like 10 years ago, analytics weren't what it has become now, right? I mean, there's some old-fashioned coaches out there that don't really use analytics, and they're kind of suffering the price for it to an extent. Fizzling out, especially at the MLB ranks. Guys like Tony La Russa and Buck Showalter, guys like that. Joe Girardi, even back in the day too. Going against analytics a little bit, and in some cases it's good, some cases it's bad. But at the same time, there are situations where you need to use your judgment a little bit more and your gut feeling in coaching. And I feel like Mark Kingston's more capable than ever of doing something like that. So I have to disagree. It's just he's not the only coach that uses statistics and metrics. That's the way the game is, man. And I don't blame him at all for having that sort of mindset if that is the case. Next question comes from SCJL 1984, And they ask, has Kingston won a game in the Super Regionals as our head coach? Last year we went 0-2 in Gainesville from my memory. Did he win a game in the Supers his first year? Yeah, so in 2018, that was his first year at South Carolina. The Gamecocks won a regional and went to play Arkansas in a super regional to go to the College World Series. And as some of y'all may remember, that was a best of three series, and it ended up going the distance. South Carolina won the middle game of that series and couldn't win the third and final game to advance to Omaha for the first time since 2012. But that was a good first year for Mark Kingston after the departure of Chad Holbrook. And yeah, I mean, it's the rest of his time at South Carolina so far for Kingston has kind of been a little bit of a bumpy ride, a little bit of ups and downs. But right now, I think you're on the higher part of his tenure with going to a super regional last year and all that entailed. Next question comes from Charlotte GC, who asks, I don't see but two legit SEC starters on the field, and one is in a bad slump. How many do you see? So, if this question is regards to pitching, I would say Eli Jones has done a great job so far as the Friday ace of this team. Again, it's tough to replace the guys that you had on this pitching staff last year. I mean, you're replacing an entire weekend rotation, which is not easy to do. And I feel like South Carolina and Mark Kingston have done a decent job of that so far, and Matt Williams too, helping out with all that. You got Eli Jones on Fridays, Dylan Eskew on Saturdays normally. And then I know it's a little different this weekend, but Roman Kimball's typically your Sunday starter. And South Carolina right now doesn't have a Sunday starter listed for this weekend. It's TBA. So we'll see what happens there. But I think overall, I think the pitching is very, very good for this team. It's not just the rotation, it's the guys in the bullpen, your midweek guys, all that sort of stuff is kind of really working out well together. So I think over time, we're going to find out what these starters in the rotation are kind of made of once SEC play gets going. And from there, we'll find out, who's legit and who's not. But if this is in more regards to the offense, slumps happen, right? That's baseball. It's not uncommon for even the best players like Ethan Petrie to strike out a little bit, or Cole Messina's kind of been going through it the last few games. That's the game, and you're going to fail more times than you do succeed. And you are a Hall of Famer. You can get 3 out of 10 hits, and you're hitting 300. So that's just baseball. And while it's not pretty right now, offensively speaking, with the amount of guys being left on base and not everyone clicking at the same time, sometimes it's just not realistic. And, at some point when the weather heats up and the ball starts flying out of the yard a little more and South Carolina gets into some more dire, more critical situations, I think they're going to be able to come through. So, next question comes from C.D. Kirkman, who asks, and they are just being blunt about this, why do we suck at baseball? So, I'm trying to make sure I put as many questions as I can into these segments, and whether they're a little harsh or not, I think it's only right to answer them, as best as I can. And with this question, I get it, right? You lost a series to your arch rival. I know for a lot of fans, it means a lot this series against Clemson, and you always want to win. You always want to come out on top every weekend, but that's just not realistic. Sometimes it's going to happen. You can't beat Clemson every year. South Carolina won 2 out of 3 against them last year, and this year, with the rain out on Friday, and then you lose Saturday and Sunday in one-run games, it's easy to get frustrated and think that the world's ending. But I will say, this was a top 25 showdown with two of the better teams in the country, in my opinion, and South Carolina just can't one hit short in each game. And maybe if it's a reverse where Clemson isn't the one getting the more timely hit to win the games, we're talking about South Carolina winning this weekend, and we're not having this discussion right now. So I think the team will be fine. Just give it a little time. If this lingers into SEC play, that's a different story. But right now, this is still a top 25 team in the country, and they're going to get it figured out. I have full confidence in that. Next question comes from F.A. Doc Cock, who asks, how has Bakich built a better program in 2 years than Kingston has in 7 years? And this is in regards to Clemson's coach, Eric Bakich. He's been at Clemson for 2 years now. And last year, I will say, unless I'm missing something, Clemson hosted a regional last year at Doug Kingsmore Stadium and didn't come out on top. They didn't make it to the Super Regionals. Meanwhile, in Columbia, you have South Carolina, who was stumbling, through May and in the SEC tournament, ends up hosting a regional as one of the lower seeds on the national side of things, and they end up sweeping through their bracket and going to a super regional for the first time since 2018. So, I mean, Kingston's been to two super regionals, and Clemson hasn't been to any since they hired a new coach after Monty Lee. So, I mean, I'm just telling you the facts. I'm just telling you how it is. So, anyway. Next question comes from MCKEE for USC, who asks, if you were Carson Horn, would you be angry that there's some complete bums starting over you and you never saw the field in a series that you were the hero in last year? So I get it. Carson Horn definitely was a big time bat for this team when they needed it in this Clemson rivalry series last year. And there were a lot of guys that were big heroes in that weekend. But specifically, Hornan came up big, I believe, in the middle game of that series, if I'm not mistaken, in Greenville. But don't quote me on that. But yeah, so I think the thing is it also just fair to say that he didn't hit overly well last year? I believe he hit about 248 last year. And batting average isn't everything, but it's college baseball. It's a shorter season. The better hitters in this league hit about 300 or better. And you know what? There's a lot of talent on this year's team. And you got guys like Kennedy Jones swinging the bat well, Blake Jackson, Dylan Brewer's been unbelievable. You're not replacing Ethan Petrie. It's a crowded outfield, first off. And then at DH, you got a guy like Tyler Causey or Gavin Casas who can slide in there. So, is it fair to just say that there are a lot of talented guys on this team and it's tough to play everyone you want? I get it. I get what you're saying. But at the same time, last year's last year. And, maybe he didn't have a great spring. That's a coaching decision at the end of the day. And, Kingston's trying to put out the best lineup possible. And like I said before, if you get that extra hit in each game, you might come out on top. Who's to say you don't? So it's easy to be critical when things aren't going right. But look at it from a half glass, half glass full perspective or empty, whatever the case might be. I think South Carolina is going to be fine offensively. I do feel like Hornig deserves a chance, but right now it's just not happening, and we'll see what happens. There's going to be an opportunity out there if a guy's hitting well. Next question comes from Sandlapper29, who asks, will there be a midseason move at Kingston's position? No. Next question comes from _JT Mathwig, who asks basically why and how. It's baseball. Like I said before, it's not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's not about how you start. It's about how you finish. There's so many different cliches you can use to kind of refer to what's going on right now. Again, South Carolina's 10-3 on the season, guys. It's not like they're under 500 and the sky's falling. They lost a series to a top 10 team in the country. It is okay. It's week 3. We're going on week 4 in the baseball season right now. There are still, South Carolina is going to be playing until June, most likely. So we've got a lot of time left, at least 4 months left in this season. So, there's no need to hit the panic button right now. I get it. I do. As a baseball fan myself, I can understand where you guys are coming from with, the little bits of, concern and stuff. But at the same time, I think the offense is going to figure it out. And the good news is your pitching staff, which was a question mark at the beginning of the year compared to the offense, which is now kind of in question a little bit. I think the pitching staff is going to be fine and continue to pitch well, while the offense at some point, it's got to happen, right? I believe there's way too much talent on this team to underperform at this kind of rate. And, you got another series this weekend against a team that you should sweep before SEC play starts. And you really got to get going here. So we'll see what happens. Next question comes from Kmart84, who asks, where is the situational hitting? Terrible job versus Clemson. Yeah, like I said before, you're right about this. You can't expect to win when you go 4 for 37 with runners on base and then 4 for 23 with runners in scoring position. It's just very hard to do that. It's point being, South Carolina's got to be able to score when they have these opportunities to do so. Obviously, you can't cash in on every single run scoring opportunity, but if you cash in more times than not, you're going to win games. And that's kind of what's holding South Carolina back right now. I think they've got a very good lineup. I like the looks that they've had this week, mixing it up a little bit, moving Dylan Brewer to lead off and Talmadge Lecroy to the 2 hole, followed by Petrie and Messina. Maybe getting some guys days off and stuff to get them right. I think we'll see what happens this weekend, but I do fully expect the team to get it right, as I've kept saying in this entire video. Next question comes from 1M Creek Cock, who asks, "Hey Jack, what do you think are the strengths and weaknesses of this team? Any surprises for you after 13 games, good or bad?" I think the pitching staff, as I said before, has kind of been a strength so far. I think your rotation, I think you'd like a little more length out of in specific starts, especially against Clemson this past weekend. But overall, I've been pretty impressed. I think one thing that stands out is that, you got a guy like Eddie Copper, a freshman, who struggled in his first outing of his college career on opening day. And since then, he's gone on to make 3 starts and give you quality after quality outing. That is really solid for a kid that is just getting his college career going and pitching as well as he is. And, who's to say that at some point this year, maybe he slides into the rotation, right? And I think that's especially true when you look at the SEC tournament where it's all hands on deck and you're playing game after game potentially. And then the same thing with the postseason with the regional, super regional in Omaha. You're in a position where your pitching is going to be kind of out the window at some point. You just got to go with who you've got. And Eddie Copper, I would feel very confident in making a start here and there if you need him to on the big stage. But we'll see what happens. But I think even out of the bullpen, the fact that on Tuesday you had Eddie Copper start and then you had, I think, 3 relievers pitch afterwards and you get 13 strikeouts to no walks. That's a 1 game sample size, but that's a very, very good sign of, okay, you can throw guys in there and they're more likely than not going to be able to go get you outs. And I think that's very good for the future. As for weaknesses, I've said it all video. I just think the offense is a little bit lackluster right now. Like I said, I think they're going to get it figured out, but you got to be able to hit with guys on and not live and die by the home run ball, which I don't think they have. I don't think they have lived and died by the home run. And I think as the weather heats up, it's natural that they're going to hit a lot of home runs. And when you have Cole Messina and Ethan Petrie and guys like that, Gavin Cassis in the middle of that lineup, they're going to hit a lot of homers, and that's just how baseball works sometimes. But I also do think you've got guys in the order now that are not home run threats that can really provide you with some base hits in these run scoring situations. So those are my positives and negatives, I guess, strengths and weaknesses, that sort of thing. Next question comes from our last question actually comes from Legendary Cock, who asks, "Do any of these questions get answered?" So, I posted this on Sunday after the Clemson game, that final game of the series on the Insiders Forum, for y'all to ask these questions. And my thing is, I post at the beginning of the week, and then I don't answer questions on the forum for this. I specifically wait till the end of the week to write up a transcript version of this to answer all y'all's questions a little more in detail. And then I also get a video ready for Friday mornings to post. And that's the way it's been every week. And I've enjoyed doing it this way. And I hope y'all like the style of content I'm putting out with this. Obviously, the whole video thing is kind of foreign to me, a little new to me, but I'm enjoying the process of it. And look, I enjoy talking baseball and answering these questions. So I hope we can keep this going for a long time. And if you have any questions, like I said, for next week's episode, go ahead and leave them in a comment on this YouTube video or on the Insiders Forum at the beginning of every week. Until then, have a great weekend and be safe.